Hello, everyone. My name is Alia Sandovar, and together with my co-host David Kislev, we welcome you to the 2020 Playful Creative Summit. This conference is unique because we want to focus on creating a playful atmosphere with authentic conversations with makers, designers, creatives, and play experts. And I'm here today with Lily Higgins. She is an urban designer living in Rotterdam, Netherlands, although she's originally from Greensboro, North Carolina. Wait, I think I might have screwed that up. Where are you originally from? Yeah, I did say it, Greensboro, North Carolina. Yay! I got it. Welcome, Lily. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Let me go ahead and tell our audience about you so they know a little bit of who you are and what you do. Lily is a future-oriented designer of experiences, processes, tools, and methods. She operates as an independent consultant at the intersection of strategic foresight, human-centered design, and serious play. Her current work and practice is informed by her recent thesis, Future Flex, a play-based approach to organizational change in the age of uncertainty. She currently collaborates with Changeist as an associate designer, Playspace as a play experience designer, and various other clients from corporates to local initiatives. She is a trainee at the European School for Urban Game Design and the founder of Urban Playwalks Rotterdam, which we'll talk in a bit, a monthly walking tour of site-specific urban games that play with the norms of public space. Ooh, that sounds really interesting. She loves talking situationist urban interventions, mundane futures, and applications of immersive theater. Wow, wow, wow. Welcome, Lily.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we get into all that juiciness in your bio, we always ask all speakers this one question, which is, what is a game or activity that you used to play with as a child?
I was thinking about this, and two games came to mind. And both sort of, in a way, have a similar game mechanic if you want to like go into game design terms. But one of the games is called Sardines, and Sardines is like the inverse of hide and go seek. So I've heard that it is an internationally known. Different countries call it different things, but essentially the game is that there's one person who hides, and it's really fun to play in a large building with a lot of different small rooms. And one person hides, and then the whole group looks for that person. And the goal of the game is to not be the last person looking for what ends up being a big cluster of people hiding all in a very small space. Um, so it's a really interesting game because there's a great switch of role sort of in the middle. So you start out as a seeker and you're kind of on the team of the other seekers, and you're searching for that one person who's hiding. But as soon as you find that person, it's kind of like every man for himself. So if you open the door of like a small bathroom or something and you see that person who's hiding, or maybe you're not the first person to find them and there's 5 people there, uh, and you're with someone else walking alongside you searching, you pretend that you don't see them. So you're like, oh no, they're not in here. And then you like close the door. And then when that person who you were seeking with goes out of sight, you quickly run and hide and like go and you join the team of the hiders. So I think it's a very funny game. Also, when you're hiding, there's just this tension in the dark with you and like 10 other people crammed in a closet. That's just super fun, and it's great for like group bonding and all these other things. And another game I love is called Kick the Can, which is also a game that involves hiding. So I think there's something there that I think is very fun, like this secretive, sneaking around kind of games, um, which is kind of also like, is like tag, but then there's a bucket involved, and freeing people from the jail. And it's a game I have really good memories playing with my dad and with my cousins. Um, also very dynamic game. So what both of those things have in common is um, they're very physical games.
Mm.
So not necessarily in a way of being a sport, but they're very embodied. So there's like board games, which I think a lot of people feel very attached to. But I always felt very alive when I played physical games, and like kick the can is a game you play in the street, and so you're playing in public space, and that's sort of a red thread now in my work of um, what does it mean to go back and play in the street as an
Mhm.
adult.
Yeah, and I also played Kick the Can, so I feel like it's an international, like and
Yeah.
all you need is a can, right? And like the
Mhm.
rules, and then you just play, whatever country you are in the world, and all you need is this, not even a street, you just need like a patch, a flat patch to like kick it.
Yeah,
So,
it's very like low material, low rules, very easy to understand. And I recently played Kick the Can at one of the Urban Playwalks, um, and we were in a park where there were lots of other people there, of course. And there was this group of young men who were sort of off to the side on the field, and they were watching us as this group of adults playing this children's game, essentially. And some of the people from our group playing Kick the Can used their group as a place to hide. So they actually camouflaged themselves in the group of these people who then were sort of sheltering them, and pretending that they were just like chatting and like on their phone and like smoking, and then that person would like flip their hood back and like run towards the can and try to beat the person who was it. So I love how games like that especially become so accessible
hmm
even for non-players.
hmm
And then you can engage with people who you wouldn't normally have been able to engage
hmm
with. um, yeah, that's to me a really beautiful part of urban play.
Yeah, but I also we'll get into. I really want to get into chatting more about urban play because in. But I want to ask you one question before that, because I used to do the Come Out and Play festival they have one in New York and then one in San Francisco, and it's all based on urban play. It's very cool
Hmm.
festival. But before that, what is your definition of playfulness?
um my definition of playfulness is, well, to me, play and playfulness are words that sometimes have, um, to me, they mean different things than maybe what they mean to most people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way that I see play as an activity or as a mindset is actually that it doesn't always have to appear playful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so play can be more, at least for me in my design practice, play is more of a way of viewing the world, um, as something that you can play with. So it's essentially becoming aware that you are an active player in the world, whether that's in the street or in your school or in your work. We are all players in these various systems, um, with various norms and various rules
Mm-hmm.
and various goals. And to me, embodying play, um, means becoming aware of your agency as a player in those systems, and sort of having the courage to say, well, what happens if I, tweak this rule? And what happens if I change my role in this situation? And what happens if I change the goal of this activity or of this encounter? Um, and by doing that, you're starting to essentially play with reality,
Mm-hmm.
um, and play with these systems, and bring a heightened awareness about that reality and systems, and I don't know, life
Mhm.
is malleable and it's changeable, and that we can be active in exploring the ways that we can change it.
Mhm.
Um, so to me, that's the epitome of playfulness,
Mhm.
is figuring out sort of where the wiggle room is within systems and
Mhm.
within maybe constrained situations.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great way of looking at it. And I'm curious if you can maybe share with us an example of like, because I'm sure people are wondering, okay, I get the idea, but how does that one change or find that wiggle? Maybe you can give us an example of how one might do that with a role or a structure or something.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is to start thinking of things as games.
Mm.
So start asking yourself the question, if this was a game, what would be the rules? Who would be the players? What would be the playing field? What would be the play objects? What would be the time frame in which this game is played? And this is a method that I use, which I
Mhm.
call play thinking, kind of like a spin-off of design thinking, or um, where I sort of break down systems and reality into the six main components of play and games. So there's like the universal six components, like rules, roles, play area, time, objects, and goal.
Mhm.
Um, so it's very easy to sort of categorize and see reality and see systems when you become aware that there are just these six categories of games. And then ask yourself the question, well, what is that? What are each of those in this situation? Um, and I imagine them to be kind of on like a mixing board, if
Mhm.
you can imagine that. And it's like, what if I just like slide this one up and slide this one down? Like, and then let the game play out a little bit and
Mhm.
see how did I change the dynamics within that system. Um, so what's really easy, an easy way to do this,
Mhm.
is to find yourself in a space where the rules or the social norms are very clear.
Mm.
So my example I always use is like a train station. Um, the social norm within a train station is to get where you're going as quick as possible and take the most efficient route there, and even run if necessary, like that's totally fine. um, and kind of don't talk to people, and just like, it's, you're trying to get from A to B, and it's about speed and efficiency essentially. um, and what happens if you take that rule and you just flip it on its head? Like, what happens if I use a train station in like the slowest and most inefficient way, and what would that look like?
Yeah.
um, so I actually did this with a group of students. I was a guest teacher at my alma mater earlier this year. And one of the activities that I had them do, because their study was, they were in a course called Power Play, where they're being asked to investigate systems and norms, essentially. And I said, okay, we're going to walk through Rotterdam Central train station. We're going to enter the gates with our tickets, and we are going to walk as slow as we possibly can to the other end of the station. And Rotterdam Central Station, those of you who have never been there, it's like a long corridor where you can go up escalators to all the different train platforms. And it's quite a long stretch of space. It takes several minutes just to walk at a normal pace through the whole station. Um, and it takes probably, I think we took about 45 minutes to cross from one entrance of the station to the other side while walking as slow as we possibly could. Um, and this brought a lot of unintended consequences. With the other passengers, they were very afraid. They started reporting our activities to the information desk. they said they are very slow people. I don't know what they're doing, but they're walking very slow. But because we were not doing anything else, no one could really, I don't know, accuse us of doing anything wrong.
Mhm.
Um, we were just subverting that one rule of
Mhm.
walk fast and sort of have an intention of where you're going. Um, and we spoke also with the security guards at the station afterwards, because they were all alerted of there's this big group of people and they're walking super slow. So they were waiting for us at the end of the station. Um, and we just discussed with them, like, well, is this illegal? And they were like, well, no, but it's weird.
Yeah.
We've been alerted. Um, so it was really interesting just what happens when you just play with one super simple rule. You really like throw a wrench in a system like that, or you really become like, um, the awareness around what you're doing is so heightened. And I was even shocked at the level of attention that we got
Mhm.
just from doing that.
That is such a cool example and so interesting. I think, and also it shows you how attached we are to the rules and structures that we have in society, and how deviating from it actually makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting, and to actually to play with this and see where sort of where can I wiggle around in this system, sort of without bumping into the law, obviously. Um, but there's so much like leeway in between what people think is the norm and what's actually like legal, or what's really not allowed. Um, and there's just like a huge expansive space in between those two that you can explore, if you have the courage to do so.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, because I just suddenly got an image of, like, here's the law, right? Like, we all are kind of bounded by whatever law in whatever country or area you're in. But actually inside of that, there's these like norms, right? Like structural norms, values, beliefs, whatever. And we actually
Mhm.
usually operate within this, like
Mhm.
within this, but within this. And
Exactly.
yeah, and it's
So I'm really interested in play as the way to explore that space.
mhm,
So this the ring that's here to
mhm,
here, like what is there? Like what are the possibilities within this outer ring of doing things differently, whether that's how we move through cities or how we interact within organizations, um, how we deal with innovation. Um, it's all part of the same, um, question for me
mhm.
about how do we play within that space.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, maybe this is the perfect time to then, talking about playing in space, for us to share a little bit about the urban play walks. What are they? How did you come up with them, etc.?
Yeah. Well, Urban Playwalks Rotterdam is my passion project, which has been going on for a little more than half a year now. Um, but it's a concept that I've been turning around in my head for at least the last 3 years. Um, it really comes from a personal place of wanting to prioritize play in my own life,
Mhm.
outside of my work. So um, my the work I'm doing as an independent consultant lies much more in the realm of innovation and strategic foresight and futures thinking, where I am applying this mindset of play, but in sometimes a more subtle way, um, more about how do we think about innovation and what is innovation, like how do we do things differently.
Mhm.
but I just felt this need for um, creating a community around actually playing together and um, connecting with people in an alternative way. So not just, going out to a bar or talking with my friends who I already know, or going to a festival. Like these are all ways that, we find new friends. And especially when you're out of school, there's sort of this question of like, what is adult friendship, or how
Mhm.
do we connect with each other? Um, so I thought, well, what if I create a public event that happens once a month, um, where I design essentially a walking tour. So it's also great for tourists who want to see Rotterdam from a different vantage point. Um, and I invite both people who I know and deeply care about and complete strangers. And together we all go and do this strange thing in the streets of Rotterdam. Um, so it goes back to, I guess, my love for street games and the way as a kid I felt so connected to the people who I played these physical games in the street with, and the vibe and the energy that you can create with a group of people by actually physically playing. Um, and as a kid, I was also exposed to a lot of collaborative games.
Mhm.
So I was never really into sports, but I was very interested in collaborative play. And I luckily went to an elementary school that really promoted that. Um, so a lot of the games that I design within the urban playwalks are collaborative, or they're not even really games at all. They're more playful experiences.
Mhm.
Um, and so in short, a playwalk is around a 3 to 4 hour walking tour through a specific part of Rotterdam that I've curated
Mhm.
essentially. Um, and for me, it's also about, I call them my love letter to the city, because I'm really in love with Rotterdam as a place. And sometimes it's hard for people who don't know the city to see the beauty in it. If anyone has ever visited Amsterdam versus Rotterdam, there's like this huge divide in people who think Rotterdam is like this weird, ugly place. But I see there's just so much beauty in it. And I want to share that kind of wonder that I feel about the city with other people. Um, so that's sort of like, that's another reason I
Mhm.
started the playwalk. But it's a walking tour, and we walk in a route that I've designed. And along this route, I find kind of alibis for play. So whether that's an empty street corner where there's nothing there, so that offers a space for us to play a small game, or maybe there's an interesting piece of infrastructure that's repetitive and we can play with that, or maybe I think of an existing game, like a children's game that people know, and I think, oh, how could I use this specific space to make that game more fun, um, or to change it, or to make it more interesting. So it's like a string of games as we move through the city, um, and it's really lovely.
That sounds like so fun. And how long does it last? Like, and like, is it like 1 hour tour, 2 hour tour?
It's usually about 4 hours actually.
Okay.
So it's like a deep dive into this playful attitude. I've noticed that I have done a few that were shorter during the winter when it was like too cold to be outside for 4 hours. Um, but I've noticed that sticking with a 4 hour event really allows people the time to like drop into the play zone, I
Mhm.
guess. Because it takes a while for us as adults to allow ourselves and give ourselves a permission to really engage like with
Mhm.
our full selves. Um, And in 2 hours, people are sort of just getting there, but in 4 hours, we can actually, in the last hour and a half, really play together in a very, sort of in a very full way. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it really takes time to like sort of let go and like be able to be and get into that mindset, because I do think that the world is not structured for us to be in this flow all the time. And
Mhm.
so we need to get conditioned in a different way to get more into that flow. And yeah. So you mentioned a little bit ago that you want to be focused on making, making time for play every day, so making it so that it's much more part of your daily life. Besides the walks, is there anything that you do personally to commit yourself to being playful every day?
Um, well, it's actually a result of the walks.
Mm,
So I've realized in the last couple months, now that I've been doing the play walks for, we are on our seventh edition this Saturday, actually. Um, I realized that I've started seeing the city differently, even
mm,
when I'm not play walking, and when I'm just walking to a meeting or getting my groceries or doing really normal things where sometimes, I'm not in the play vibe. Like,
mhm.
I'm not in that same like
Yeah,
play atmosphere
yeah.
with a group of 15 people and we're, going through the streets, and that's a totally different thing. But I have noticed that I've started seeing alibis for play just in the street. And when I'm on my own, that I feel able to engage with them. So that's to me felt very like that the play walk for me has become this way of helping myself even see the city differently even more. Because normally I'm sort of showing other people, like, look how we can play here. Um, but then I wouldn't always normally see that myself in daily life.
Hmm.
But in the last few months, I've started observing that I will just kind of like see something in the weird architecture of Rotterdam in like a building that I'm passing under, and instead of just walking straight, like I will just like do like one loop around a pole, or like go like a few steps down and then a few steps up, and like just do small things that deviate my own patterns,
Hmm.
um, and kind of allow myself to do that. These like very, very small things that don't take time, and they don't like I don't lose anything from doing that. Um, but really being like present in the city and looking around and seeing uh, the weird way the sidewalks are designed
Hmm.
and the strange way that we move through the city. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed playing just on my own a little bit more.
that,
Um,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
I would encourage people to sort of. It's hard when you're maybe not when you haven't looked out for it. But there are so many small opportunities to just play around a little bit with the street itself and just with the act of walking, um, and to sort of play with the norms of walking. I think that's an um, easy and clear little task to give yourself. Like, how could I just walk from A to B just a little bit differently? Whether that's in the actual steps you take, like what if you take really big steps or really small steps, or you don't step on the cracks, or um, hop from side to side, or jump from little concrete thing to little concrete thing. um, all of these things sort of, I don't know, they just add liveliness to the daily routine.
Yeah, I agree. And it keeps us fresh because yeah, I think I know for myself when I'm in the routine, I lack inspiration. And so like finding ways to you know, look at the world differently or come out of my little box, right? Really re-inspires me. I think it's one of the reasons I love travel because things are always different when you're traveling. And but I love how you're saying, just look around and see how you can change one little thing. Even just walking can be a way in which you can play with, how it is that you play, how it is that you walk, or what you do where you're walking can just create a whole different game for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm, we're kind of getting close to time, so I have just a couple more questions for you. And one of them is, what myths do people have about the way you work, or things that people might assume?
What myths?
Yes.
Oh, that's a really good one. Um, well, people always assume that I design for children,
Oh.
and that I like work with children all the time or something, but I don't think I've ever designed anything for children in my life. Um, I I always have to make that distinction that I am interested in play for adults.
Hmm.
And like the Playwalks, for
Mm-hmm.
example, are actually an adult-only event.
Mm-hmm.
And in the description of the event, it says this event is not designed for children, which most people are like, "What does how how can you say that kids aren't allowed to come on your play thing?" And I'm like, "They're not." um, I I always um, say that children don't have a monopoly over play. Um, they do not own play as a concept, and they are not the only ones who play. But one thing is for sure is that they do not need our help to play. They only need us to give them the time, just like, you have from this time to this time, and they will fill that time with play. Whereas if you tell an adult you have from this time to this time, they will not fill that time with play, probably. Um, and I'm also like another myth which is a bit more nuanced, is that being playful is the same thing as um, being a child again, or
Mm.
going back to being a child, or getting in touch with your inner child. And this is something that I am entirely not interested in.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, like in my work, I'm trying to define what does play mean in the context of being an adult,
Mhm.
and what does that look like, and how can we play in a grown-up way,
Mhm.
which still means that we can be silly, but that doesn't equate to going back to being a child. And that's a really important distinction for me, that we as adults can have our own play world.
Mhm.
uh, and there's so much such a huge spectrum like within that. um, Another myth is that I design video games,
Mhm.
which I do not at all, ever. I'm I really am not so interested in digital gaming.
Mhm.
um, I like technically I studied gamification, and that is a very highly disputed term in itself. And I always have to make the distinction as well that gamification, as sort of what it's turned into, is more like, here's a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. So making really boring, terrible things have now points and leaderboards and all this external like motivation to do
Mhm.
something that people don't want to do.
Mhm.
I think is very manipulative and has a lot of ethical considerations that are kind of ignored. So I also don't gamify things. I will not take your boring subject and make it fun. Um, so there's all of these angles of
Mm-hmm.
play and games that I sort of have to say, like, no, it's not quite that, it's not quite that. Um, to me, it's really leveraging what the real power of
Mm-hmm.
play is, which is having the courage to see and do things differently
Mm-hmm.
and to play within systems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and games, well, if you're talking about game versus play, and there's a spectrum between play and game, play being totally free. So like on one side is free play, it has no structure. It's like kicking a rock along the street. Like there's no goal, it's not a game. It's just sort of playful, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like kids are very good at free play, adults not so much. And then there's game on the other end of the spectrum, which is like a closed system. So it's there's very clear rules, roles, goals. There's probably a world around that game, um, and I'm really interested in the in between
Mm-hmm.
part. So play experiences that have a bit of that structure to create a kind of dynamic play experience, but that don't go into full-fledged game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's also a kind of way that I describe my work.
Cool. I love all these, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's firing all kinds of little things in my brain. So that's,
Great.
yeah, and yeah, because I agree with you in terms of, like, of course, myths. People hear the word play and equals child or children, and then also
Mhm.
they hear people who are game or play consultants in some way, and then they assume, okay, video games, right? Um, so that's one thing, and so it's good for people to hear that there's different types of work, jobs, design around the concept of play that are not necessarily what we assume you would do or what you assume you would be. And so with
Mhm.
that, I'm curious, do you
Definitely.
have a playful, what is your favorite playful or creative word? Or it could be a phrase.
Playful or creative word?
Yeah.
Um, well, I recently came across, I'm finally reading the book Homo Ludens, which
Yes.
is a very important book written by a Dutch author in the 30s who already was theorizing about the importance of play as the origin of culture, which I think is like the most beautiful sort of way to
Mhm.
describe play and how I see it. Um, and he uses the words mirth
Mm.
and rapture to describe play. And I, when I think about those words and how I feel when I am really giving myself permission to play, those are the closest thing that I would
Mm.
think describes how you can feel, how play can um, sort of free you in that way to experience such intense joy. So mirth and rapture would definitely be um, my chosen play descriptors.
Wonderful. Is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask that you would like people to know about play or games or urban play or what you do?
Um, I think we covered a lot of um, how I view play, and one thing with which I'm working on, I guess what we didn't cover so much was how play can be used within the context of
Mm-hmm.
organizations, um, which is what I wrote my thesis on, and what I'm still investigating with clients. how can we bring um, a mindset of play within
Mm.
organizations, and by that, essentially, a mindset of or a feeling of agency
Mhm.
that the people within that organization have to play with the rules. Um, and it's an interesting uh, it's an interesting place to be in, to see if play has a place within these organizations, and if organizational culture as it stands um, allows for that and celebrates that, or if it's incompatible. And I'm still trying to discover that, um, how to communicate the value of giving people the agency within a very perhaps strict organizational
Mhm.
structure.
Mhm. Wow. Well, that is something really exciting that I can't wait to hear more about and see how you go about it. And so um, we are sort of like finishing up now, and I'm wondering if you can share with us where we'll put links, but I would love for you to tell our audience like where they can reach you, maybe your website, um, and uh, and what the download is that you're offering for them in case they want to know more.
Yeah. Well, I am reachable on many different mediums. My website is where you can find a little bit more out about my past work. It's Lily, Lily dash Higgins.com, but there will be a link, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Lily Observes. And the download that I have wanted to share is actually the facilitator's handbook that I developed as part of my thesis, um, which is about a play based approach to organizational change in the age of uncertainty. And it's actually a full fledged training program, um, which I developed. And you can read about the exercises that are part of this training program, and how you might facilitate them. It's sort of all the information is there actually um, to do these exercises and see how you can use play in an organization to um, open up dialogue about uncertainty.
So cool. And I'm sure people, I saw it and it's pretty big document. So you guys are going to really, really love it. It's going to be
Yeah,
great.
it's like it's a lot of stuff is in there.
Yes.
So I would love to connect with anyone who's interested in that and interested in that approach of developing workshops within organizations. This is my bread and butter. This is my expertise. Um, I'm a workshop designer. I'm an experience designer, and so that the Future Flex Facilitators Handbook is really my first work on that, in that realm.
Very, very cool. I can't wait to read it myself too. Thank you so much, Lily, for coming on the summit. It's been really lovely speaking to you. I've enjoyed it so much. And to all of you watching, if you want to rewatch Lily's video, if you didn't get a chance to see all the videos of the speakers, then we invite you to upgrade to the Playground Pass, and that way you have access to all the recordings for 12 months. And I think that's it. So thanks so much, Lily, and thanks everyone for watching. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.